comments, and we can
You're on,
leave
Mr.
us
Mayor.
with
Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Before I call the meeting to order, I just want to remind everybody in the audience, if you have any comments or want to discuss anything that's on the agenda, we'd like you to come up to the middle table here so everyone can hear you. I'll call the meeting to order. Jen, will you take roll call?
Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah.
Commissioner Corbin.
Here.
Commissioner Waldner.
Here.
Commissioner Thill.
Here.
Mayor Dennett.
Here. We have the agenda in front of us.
Make a motion, we accept the agenda with crossing off number 2 under new business.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the agenda. Do I have any other comments, discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Under appearances and acknowledgement, do I have a motion to acknowledge letter from Basin Electric Power Co-op amend capacity purchase agreement?
So moved.
Second.
I don't get a video replay on that one. Any video
I'll
replay?
let Jen decide that one.
No, I don't care.
Brad, this one's yours.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Currently, the way our agreement reads with Basin Electric at our generation plant, we have to run every month. And in the terms of the agreement, it says we run every month to demonstrate that the units are capable of operation. Discussions with them occurred on the frequency that we have to run them. In Fort Pierre, the Missouri River cities were running quarterlies, and I asked them if that would be something that they would entertain, and they said certainly. And so this letter is a letter from Basin stating that they will reconstruct, if you will, or amend the agreement to allow us to go to quarterlies, which will save us fuel and wear and tear and everything on the units for both of us. They pay for the fuel, so it saves them in fuel costs, and then wear and tear in the units for us. So there's no reason to run them every month. They're diesel generators. You can run them once a quarter and everything will be just fine. So that's what we did in Fort Pierre, and that was my recommendation. They accepted it, and this letter states that. All we have to do is acknowledge it and send it back to them, and they will put that in their file, and they were satisfied with that through their legal team as to being an amendment to the contract.
Thank you. Further comment, discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Does anybody want anything taken off the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar. Second.
All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Moving down into unfinished business. We will have a public hearing upon application for sale of alcoholic beverages, temporary alcohol license, Madison Fire Department Fireman's Dance. Mr. Minert, would you want to?
Randy Minert with the Fire Department. Here on behalf of the Fire Department.
Chief Minner.
Right,
Sorry.
right.
All right.
Here
I gave you the mister. Okay.
on behalf of the Fire Department, asking for the Commission's approval for an alcohol license for our 48th annual Fireman's Dance. We have it scheduled for April 4th, right next door here, downtown City Armory. I have worked with Jen, or Jen's got our special event insurance taken care of for us. The dance, it runs from 9 to 1. We card at the door. Nobody under 21's allowed. Security, we asked the PD, they'll do some walkthroughs for us. But other than that, I don't know if there's any questions.
Jen, do you have any?
Nope. Like Randy stated, we worked together. I have already received the endorsement for the special event insurance due to the liquor liability, and we're good.
Do I hear anything more for a public hearing? Not hearing any, I'll close the public hearing. We will move down to number 2, approve the application for the sale of alcoholic beverages, temporary alcohol license, Madison Fire Department, Fireman's Dance.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Have fun.
bet.
Get a lot of people there. Raise a lot of money.
Move down to number 3, public hearing upon application of sale of alcoholic beverages, retail on-off sale malt beverage, and South Dakota Farm Wine License, Dakota Cinema LLC, Dakota Cinema.
I guess we were just wanting to have the South Dakota Farm license and beer sales at the theater. We have a plan in place as far as how we will control the sale. We will only allow 2 beverages per person. People will get a band that we will either mark or punch. We can work, just talking with different people. The distributors can get us like glow-in-the-dark bands, so we're able to, walk and know who has them. We will mark, and again, like I said, 2 beverages per person. They'll be poured in a plastic cup. There'll always be someone that's 21 working the nights that we will serve. Our plan is to sell Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, so that would allow 4 shows where you would be able to have a beverage. No alcohol Sundays for the matinee or the 7 o'clock and Monday and Tuesday. We wanted to be respectful for people who, for religious or personal beliefs, don't maybe believe in alcohol, don't want their children around it. Not like you're going to get wild and crazy at the movie theater with 2 beers, but we still want to be respectful to other people's beliefs and opinions. So I guess if anybody else has any questions or concerns of anything that we can.
I assume you're Kelly.
Yes, I'm Kelly, sorry.
This has come up in Sioux Falls.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the commission, the first time anyway, they struck it down, they denied that request. I don't know where that's at now, I know the prior.
Yep, and, and I think one of the biggest things was the plan, not having a plan of how we're going to control. One thing that I feel we're very fortunate with here in Madison, we've been here 16 years. Peggy's been here. Peggy Layton, who works for us, has been here. We know probably 95% of the people that walk through the door. We will card everybody, but that kind of, I think, helps us versus your larger cities where you don't necessarily know people that are walking through. And, carding, putting the band on, maintaining it to 2 beverages. We don't want people, and you don't need to. You need to enjoy the movie. You don't need to be in and out. We would not sell, you can have your 2, last one would be served at 8:15 at the latest. So you have 1 hour in the movie, you can get your last one up to 8:15 and then no more. So there would still be at least a good 45 minutes to an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the length of the movie, where you wouldn't be drinking a beer right up walking out the door. So really want to try to put some control in it. There's really been a lot of requests and questions, and people have asked for that. It's just kind of, you go to your larger cities, you can order a full-service meal and a hard liquor drink and beer, and so just having one other thing that makes us a little bit different than your Sioux Falls and Brookings, because they do not right now have that. I know they are discussing it for the State Theater downtown. I don't know where that's at this point, but.
Are you gonna have somebody walking through there and make sure that they don't hand it off to a minor once they get through the door?
Yes, so we will pour them into a clear cup. You will have a glow-in-the-dark band that, and then we will, right now, we do not walk up and down the aisles just because, but with the nights where we have beer, we will, be checking that and making sure, that you have a band with, if you're drinking a cup, that you have a band on.
Because I've had a lot of people over the last 3-4 days ask me what kind of a plan they got, and I said, well, we'll find out Monday night.
Yep. But, I mean, we've really thought a lot about it, and, I don't want it to be something that people think you're going to be able to come out and drink a 6-pack in your 2 hours and, get crazy. We're going to be closely monitoring that. College, we have DSU once a month. That's on Tuesdays. That was another big reason for Tuesday. We would not serve on Tuesdays because I'm not going to deal with a packed house and college kids because that's really going to be a hard situation there. But again, I think us knowing the majority of the people, we will. Tim and Landry are always there. Tim can kind of keep an eye when people are going in as well. We've discussed a lot on how we're going to control and make sure that people aren't passing that on. People sneak it in anyway. Unfortunately, people bring their own popcorn, they bring their own water, their own pop, beer. We do what we can to stop that, but being able to purchase it directly from us would hopefully stop people from bringing it in. But
Crazy, usually you just go for the popcorn, not the
right?
movie.
How would you bring your own popcorn then?
Yeah,
No,
that's
people do, and is it
big
black baggie
coat.
in their purse?
Wow.
I find Ziploc bags all the time. I'm like, oh, our popcorn's so good, you guys.
It is.
Well, from the public safety perspective, I mean, we've had some conversations with the police chief, and obviously,
Yep, and I talked with
And-
him as well.
yeah, and, it's one of them things that it's your business, and you know the rules, you know the laws. I like your plan. That sounds, pretty good. And, from our perspective, if it's not working right or not working well, obviously the law enforcement will get involved and take care of it.
Right.
And ultimately, we can revoke it. If we think it's not working right, we'll pull it back out. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
And if I feel like we just, okay, we thought we could control it, we're thinking maybe it's not, we can decide to also not renew that license or just stop selling as well.
sure.
I don't want to get into where it's a headache and an added stress to us either.
Yep.
So, but it is something that is commonly brought up multiple times a week. Man, when are you going to have beer here? And,
Sure.
if it's something extra and different, again, that we can keep people here for the movies, that's our big thing is with doing this is, what can we do to make this a place instead of everybody taking a trip to Sioux Falls or Brookings for the movies? How can we keep you here and keep that revenue within the city and the activity within the city?
My personal opinion is I like businesses that think out of the box and try different things. And here again, it's your business. It's our job to help you stay out of your way to the majority of it, and let you do your thing as you see fit as entrepreneurs and innovative ideas, whatever. I mean, go for it. And obviously, again, you know the rules, and if things don't work out, switch it, change it. Maybe you go to one night, whatever.
Right.
That's your business.
Right.
So
Yep.
I appreciate the plan, though. Thank you for that.
Yep.
I do have thought a lot about how they're going to control it. You've done a good job of putting together a plan. Some of the things you talked about here, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the
I
things.
don't want to hold this back.
Right.
But I also, one guy drinking too much next to some of these kids,
Right.
he's in trouble,
Yep.
says you lost those kids in that business.
Right. And that's
you know
where
this,
the
so I'm
control
not-
and
So I do think you've thought this through a little bit. I'm impressed.
yeah. I've struggled. I kind of, it's been a little battle within myself to try to, man, do you, so that's just how talking with, Jeff Logan, who has the Mitchell Dells Theater, and talking with Todd, this is all advice that they've given for what other cities that they've heard of are doing and how they would do it, so.
Is there anybody else here for the public hearing that wants to speak? Not hearing any, I'll close the public hearing. And do I have a motion to approve the application for sale of alcoholic beverages, retail on-off sale, malt beverage, and South Dakota Farm Wine Liquor, Dakota Cinema LLC, Dakota Cinema?
So moved.
Second?
I got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Kelly.
Thank you guys very, very
Good
much.
luck.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are you going to be my first patron, Jerry?
Mudslides.
We'll move down into new business. Do I have a motion to authorize the mayor to sign agreement, Greg and Nicole Peters, perpetual sidewalk easement and parking stall installation?
So moved.
Second?
Chad, do you want to start us off, or did you want to?
Yeah, I can say a few
Okay.
things, and Mr. and Mrs. Peters are here as well. I was introduced to Mrs. Peters moments ago. Included in the agenda packet is said agreement for 3 pages, excuse me, and also provided to you was a letter from Mr. Peters, Mr. and Mrs. Peters, excuse me, explaining what the request is, a map as well that they've developed, and it's referenced in the agreement showing where this parking would be. And then there's another printout, an 11 by 17 printout from the Lake County Beacon system showing an aerial photo as well and approximate property lines and so on. And I can say a few words as to how this came to be, and then we can go from there. Mr. Peters had approached me originally to discuss some items related to building, particularly some variance requests to the Board of Adjustment for construction of a vestibule on the side of what's known as formerly as the Shopko building. And then I assisted him in completing the application for that variance request at that time, and so that is for a setback variance for the structure. And in addition to that, Mr. Peters also had asked me about the option or an alternative of placing parking along the south side of the Shopko building there, perpendicular parking to the roadway, and then he further described it, and then of course that's shown in this drawing. Traffic would come off of 8th Street and turn perpendicular into these parking stalls. There would be a 5-foot sidewalk on the edge of those vestibules, and then the bumpers of the cars would park up against that. Also shown on this drawing is the approximate size of the area, and it shows the parking stall size at 18 feet deep by 10 feet wide. That would amount to 10 feet of that stall, 10 feet of the 18-foot stall being on the private property, and 8 feet being in the public boulevard. So I'll stand by for questions on the drawing. It was prepared by Mr. Peters or his agents, and so he can elaborate perhaps as well. It also shows the transition for the sidewalk on both sides of this area. So then, getting to the agreement itself, it's a blended agreement, if you will, on 2 separate type of items like this that we've encountered in the past. As recently as 2016, there was a request for boulevard parking like this, or very similar, on Hearth Avenue for East River Electric. I believe those parking stalls may have been entirely in the public right-of-way. They were not perpendicular to the roadway in the direction of travel. They were parallel parking. This is perpendicular. And so there's components of the agreement that addressed the parking. But in addition, with this area seeing some recent interest in additional development, in addition to what Mr. and Mrs. Peters are proposing, some apartments nearby, it was anticipated that the sidewalk committee may look at this area with the additional foot traffic that might be likely with additional residents in there. And so in talking with Mr. Peters, we tried to anticipate where the sidewalk would go. Because if we didn't do that now, and this was put in, for example, and we didn't account for pedestrian traffic, we would have probably had to struggle to deal with it later. And so we've incorporated also into this agreement some components from a sidewalk easement where the public sidewalk enters onto private property, and we, the city, still retains the right, or the public does, to utilize that sidewalk as a public sidewalk, but it's on private property. We've instituted that, or we've used that agreement from time to time, most particularly on the sidewalk projects. When those come up, people want to avoid a tree or something. It's pretty rare, but it has come up. And that's been done in the past. So this agreement merges those two agreements together. I've coordinated with Mr. Jinks with this as well to try to make sure it made sense and flowed reasonably well. And that's the document you have before you. And I'd be happy to try to stand by for questions.
I have a question for David. David, being this has 10 foot of the parking is on the private and 8 feet on the right of way, which is public, do they have the right to put up signs saying just parking for their businesses only?
No.
Or, okay,
Not if it's in our city right away.
okay. Thank you. Craig, Nicole, did you want to come up and add anything?
At least introduce ourselves.
I'm Greg and this is Nikki Peters.
Hi.
Nice to meet you both.
Thanks. So we think we've set up everything, as much information, working with Chad, that you might need. But if you have any other questions that we can answer, we'll certainly do our best. We're looking to close on the building March 31st. And we need this space for a future tenant in order to help us go into that big building, because we're only going to be using half of it, and the project's too big for us to kind of go in alone, if you will. So that's kind of how it all started.
We've been in Madison for 17 years. We've owned the hardware store here for 17 years, and we're in this will be our third location in Madison, because we were downtown originally, but we're going from about 6,500 square feet to about 15,000 in selling space that we'll be using for our purpose in the new building.
Quick question, were you planning on doing like parking in the back there then too? On
Yeah,
the east?
we are planning on putting parking, we're planning on paving the access in the back and adding parking stalls to the east as well.
Okay.
So we have a street light in that area. Brad, what are your thoughts on?
We've got a couple things we need to work around, and had a good discussion with Mr. Peters earlier this afternoon. Probably the biggest one, difficulty-wise, is the street light. It's right in the middle of where they want to put the parking. The access to electricity on the other side of the street is very poor. There's a lot of trees and that type of stuff, and so it becomes kind of a difficult proposition to put just one street light on the other side. The power for the other street lights on that side all run through that particular street light that's sitting there, and so we'd have to figure out some way to get power to them also, in addition to trying to put one on the other side of the street. So we looked at the options. One option that was discussed, and the Peters would be interested in doing this would be to put them up closer to the building. Now, we'd have to go to a different style fixture, one that puts out more of a square pattern. We use it for our security lighting. It's the same lights that we have on the north side of the Armory here, so you're all familiar with those. But they put out a square pattern rather than the longitudinal pattern like we do on the streets. And that way we could reach from where the poles would be close to the building. The sidewalk on the other side of the street is 80 feet. And that's about, these lights do about an 80 by 80 square patch on the ground. So we'd be just covering the sidewalk, and that would be something that would get the street, the parking lot, and the sidewalk all lit. We would have to increase the number of fixtures. And so probably 3 fixtures, one on either end more or less, and one in the middle. And we'd have to work out how that was done. Since we currently have a street light there, if we put one in theory, we could maintain that as a city street light. They would add the other 2 in and pay for those as security lights, was kind of what we talked about, open for discussion. But it was I thought it was a fair starting point because we do have a street light down there. We do have an interest in lighting the streets, so I thought that was a fair starting point, and they were agreeable to looking at that option. We also have a transformer up by the far right-hand side of the building. If you look at the sidewalk where it tapers off, there's a transformer there. There'll have to be a little bit of a modification from the drawing to still incorporate that. And then there's primary lines that run to that transformer, and then a second one that runs all the way down through the parking lot, probably about, 5 or 6 feet back of the curb, something like that. And it runs all the way through that parking lot. So we'd have to protect those during the construction, make sure that nothing happens to our wire. Concrete over top the wire is not necessarily a bad thing. Preferably, if we'd have known about it before, we probably would have put it in a sleeve, so conduit, so if we had to replace it sometime in the future, we could. In this case, the thing about concrete is typically nobody digs into your line when there's concrete over top of it. It kind of protects our line, so it's both good and bad. The other thing is there's less chance. They can still do it. They're capable. They like using the big locator. The other thing is that there's a water line that runs right underneath more or less the curb and gutter all the way through there. So as we look to the future to replacing that line, some of those things, we might look at, even looking at, theoretically, you could possibly replace that line before or part of this project so that we don't have to worry about that in the future. And that would be so that we wouldn't have to dig up some of the concrete to work on the line if we had a break or something like that. I didn't look at what type of line it was or anything like that. I haven't had time to do that today, but we'll certainly investigate that. And if it looks like it's prudent, that might be something we might want to look at, is replace that couple hundred and some odd feet of line there to make sure that we've got PVC C900 line under there, so we don't have, or we reduce the odds of us having to go back there and dig that up and pay for street, curb and gutter, and parking lot in that process. I think it's all doable. We'll just have to iron out, who pays for what on the different pertinences as we move them along, and I think we've got a pretty good start on that.
The other thing that we talked about too that's important to us is we've spoken to all the neighbors personally except for one, but the light pollution too is a big deal for us. We've had commercial situations where residences have had issues with light pollution, and the best option that we came up with won't have any effect on the light that is seen by the neighbors across the street. So
We'd specifically talked about wall packs, and one of the problems with wall packs is it's really hard to get a true cutoff. In other words, they're not dark sky compliant. They shine light pretty much up and out and everywhere they go, and it looked like that would probably be more of a light pollution problem than if we went with a pole, regular street light pole with a Cobra head on it that has the proper how do you want to call it, illumination pattern.
we don't want our neighbors getting sunburned from the light coming through their windows in the middle of the night.
You can, when you go down Center down here and you look at night, you can see how that works. We actually, when we did Center, there were quite a few people that, said, hey, I'm really worried about getting too much light in my house. I'm worried about this and everything. And when we got all done, we actually had one person call up and say, can you bring a security light in because it's too dark at my house? Your street lights only light up the street. And another one called and said, I have to run my porch light all the time now. The lights no longer make it to my house. But that's what we want to do, is we want to concentrate our light on the street, not on the houses. And so that's what's the plan here, too, is to keep the light on the street and parking lot, and it covers both purposes.
I think a lot of people that live in that area, they're used to Shopko and all of their lights and stuff, too. So, they're used to the activity of retail and everything there as well. So.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I also did coordinate and make street superintendent aware of what was going on with this application, and Chief Meyer as well. of the police department, so they were aware. I know with another recent development item that was before the Board of Adjustment, there was some discussion of the width of the street with the snow and so on, and so and they were both party to that discussion to a certain extent. I wanted them to be aware that this discussion was happening as well. So, thirdly, it's likely we will delay signing off on this agreement until after Mr. and Mrs. Peters own the property, and in other words, after they close. The deed is, or excuse me, this document is written such that with the presumption that they're the owners, but technically they're not right now. So we'll consider it approved, and so we'll just have to hold it, so to speak, until they close.
I'm excited to see what you guys come up with on this building. Thank you for increasing your exposure to our community, I guess.
It'll be different.
It will be.
Here, any further discussion, comments? Not hearing any. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Any public comment?
Nothing tonight, sir.
No public comment? Any announcements? No announcements. Do I have a motion to go into exec session?
So approved.
Second.
All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.